American Rescue Plan. President Joe Biden takes his message on the road. Life at Conception Act. How a new bill on Capitol Hill is designed to protect unborn babies. Election controversy. A Republican lawmaker fights to keep her seat and also tells us about her recent visit to the southern U.S. border. And papal call, what Pope Francis told French President Emmanuel Macron. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Joe Biden says that he and the First Lady are devastated by the latest mass shooting in Colorado, and he thanked the heroic police who responded, including an officer who died. The president spoke about the tragedy before heading to Ohio to promote the American Rescue Plan and Affordable Care Act. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, the nation just mourned the loss of lives in that Georgia killing spree. Now it's praying for the victims in Boulder, Colorado. 10 lives lost. And once again, President Biden is the consoler in chief.
I just can't imagine how the families are feeling, the victims whose futures were stolen from them.
President Joe Biden remembers the victims of the latest mass shooting, ages 20 to 65. This time the gunfire taking place at a supermarket. Among the victims,
Officer Eric Talley, 51.
Just days ago, the president consoled families in Georgia after 8 people there were gunned down.
We can ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in this country once again. I got that done when I was a senator. It passed. It was law for the longest time.
Vice President Kamala Harris, who this morning was swearing in the new CIA director, called the Boulder shootings tragic.
10 people were going about their day, living their lives, not bothering anybody.
After his remarks, President Biden left for Ohio, selling the American Rescue Plan and the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. It's 11 years old today.
Over 130 million Americans have the security and comfort in knowing that a pre-existing condition isn't going to prohibit them from getting insurance.
The COVID relief law means more money to help those who get health insurance through Obamacare pay less out of their own pockets. But religious liberty supporters also remember very well that under the Affordable Care Act, the Obama-Biden administration tried to force groups like the Little Sisters of the Poor to violate their religious beliefs. But they refused to pay for contraception and abortion drugs and took the case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Back to Colorado now. A 21-year-old suspect is in custody, no motive established. Flags had already been ordered lowered to half staff after the Georgia killings. Now the president has ordered them to be lowered once again. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Protecting human life is the top priority of Catholic Congressman Alex Mooney. The West Virginia Republican is leading the charge with his Life at Conception Act, which defines human life beginning at the moment of conception. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more on his effort to get it turned into law.
It is a truth that all human life begins at conception. So as a society, we should acknowledge that and decide about how we best go about protecting life.
Pro-life Congressman Alex Mooney tells me as a nation during this COVID-19 pandemic, we have taken extraordinary steps to protect public health and save lives. He adds, however, there is a huge contradiction when it comes to human life in the womb. Many turn a blind eye every year to the millions of babies lost by abortion. That is why he is the lead sponsor of the Life at Conception Act, which defines human life as the beginning at the moment of conception. The act would extend legal personhood to the unborn under the 14th Amendment, which would also overturn and eliminate the Roe v. Wade ruling.
Now, the enforcement, interestingly enough, the enforcement is still left up to the states. Most people don't think about this, but all crime is left up to the states. Assault and battery, murder, rape, robbery, those are all state laws. Those are actually not federal crimes. So each state would choose how and which ways to enforce the respect for life.
This year marks the 48th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, which has led to the deaths of over 61 million babies. The National Right to Life Committee estimates that there were more than 862,000 abortions in just 2020. If passed, the Life at Conception Act would end this. The West Virginia Catholic Congressman says he is in the process of gaining support for the bill, which had 157 co-sponsors in the House last year. He knows it's going to be an uphill battle, but says protecting human life should be a bipartisan issue.
This is consistent with my Catholic faith. Interestingly enough, it's consistent with President Joe Biden's Catholic faith. He has actually stated on the record, even until today, that he believes life begins at conception. He accepts the church's teaching on that.
Congressman Mooney tells me he will continue to fight for the lives of the unborn as long as the people of West Virginia want him here in Congress. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
The Biden administration is refusing to call the situation on the U.S.-Mexico border a crisis, but new photos are highlighting the presidency's secrecy and raising concerns. Photos released yesterday show immigrant children in U.S. custody sleeping on mats under foil blankets and separated in groups by plastic partitions. They are believed to be more than 15,000 children in U.S. custody. The photos were released by Representative Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from Texas. Joining us now is Representative Dr. Mariannette Miller-Meeks, Republican from Iowa, who was at the U.S.-Mexico border just last week. Representative Miller-Meeks, thank you so much for coming on, and great to see you again. Tell us about your visit to the border and what you saw when you were there.
Well, I actually come from Texas originally. That's where my family was from, and I still have siblings who live there. So it was interesting to go back to the border in an official capacity. We were at El Paso. We went to visit or tour a border processing facility, and then also to speak with border agents and also with the leadership of the Customs and Border Patrol Agents Union. So it was an interesting experience, and there's disorder at the border due to executive order. This is an executive order of President Biden's. He had made it known through the campaign that the borders would be open, that migrants should surge the border. So it was known that there would be a surge. It was known that this would occur, but yet they were woefully unprepared. And not only that, in this COVID package that you mentioned earlier, there was no funding for Customs and Border Protection. So their funding right now that they're using to take care of families and unaccompanied minors and single adults, male adults that are supposed to be under age 18, that funding is coming out of their operations budget. So as you alluded to, pictures that were shown, there has not been transparency by this administration on what's happening at the border. Let me give you for instance, there were in February alone, over 100,000 migrants crossing through the border, through the processing facilities, and there were about 40,000 we were informed that were detected but not apprehended, and then there are also those that were neither detected nor apprehended. These individuals are coming across, they're being brought by the cartels. This is a huge money-making operation to the millions of dollars a month. And if you think about 100,000 in a month, our legal immigration system only permits 1 million each year to come into our borders. So this is you could see that within a year we will have more than coming across our country illegally that come into our country legally. So there are children as young as one age, they said, that were left at the border, dropped off at the border, and then they have pinned to their shirt or written on the back of their shirt a phone number that's supposed to be called. I can't even imagine being a one-year-old child or the parent of a one-year-old child dropped off at the border, not knowing anyone, not even being able to speak, and then being cared for by these compassionate border patrol agents who are doing everything they can. Also, there's not testing. We specifically asked this of Secretary Mayorkas at a Homeland Security hearing that we had last week. They are not being tested. So these individuals come, they do some questionnaires, they temperature screen. They're in the facility. They're supposed to be there less than 72 hours, but it's exceeding 72 hours now because they have to be then go to HHS and ask questions, call their sponsors. But think about it. Some of the sponsors are reliable NGOs. Some of them are not. We don't know where these children are going. We don't know if the adults with them are actually their parents or their biological parents. We know that some of these children end up into human trafficking and sex trafficking. So the situation is a horrible situation, and it starts with leadership at the top who put forward a message that there should be a surge. February is not the time for the surge typically. The surge usually, the biggest excursion typically is in April or May. So if this is happening in February, it exceeds what happened in 2020. It also is now in excess of what happened in the surge in 2019. So it's just tragic what's going on at the border.
Yeah, and we have probably less than a minute left, but I really want to get to this next question. The other really big story happening right now, sort of in your world, the attempt by some Democrats to overturn the results of your election in Iowa. What's the latest on that? What can you tell us?
Well, think about fairness. We won on election night. We won at the 24-county canvass. We won the three-person bipartisan recount, was certified by the state of Iowa in a 5-member bipartisan executive council. Our opponent had the opportunity to go to the courts in Iowa, skipped over the courts and went directly to Congress. And now that the committee is set up, they're taking up her petition and have put the onus on us to prove why 22 ballots that they're bringing up were invalid. And so the onus is on us to prove that. And she said herself in a video interview with one of the news stations in Iowa that they skipped over the courts because they had to go to Congress to get the results they need. And in the brief that was filed by her attorney, Mark Elias, yesterday, he actually says in the brief that the committee should use all of their discretion to depart from Iowa law. So people should be outraged. We can't have trust and faith and confidence in our election system if we're willing to violate state laws in order to get the results we need and constantly change the rules. So this is an opportunity for all of us to emphasize that state law matters, that rules matter, and you can't just keep changing the rules and keep recounting until you get the result that you need.
Yeah, we will keep following this story, too, as well. Representative Mariannette Miller-Meeks, Republican from Iowa, thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much, and keep doing what you all do. Have a blessed day and a happy Easter.
Thank you, you too. Well, a staunch supporter of former President Donald Trump is entering the Alabama Senate race. Republican Representative Mo Brooks says that he is a, quote, fearless fighter who will not submit to the demands of socialist Democrats. He is trying to fill the seat held by retiring Republican Senator Richard Shelby. A Christian baker in Colorado who won a victory at the Supreme Court in 2018 for refusing to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple has been sued again. The new case involves the refusal of Jack Phillips to make a cake for a transgender celebration in a previous settlement. The state sided with Phillips and said that it would no longer pursue the complaint. A devastating fire swept through a massive refugee camp in southeastern Bangladesh Monday, leaving at least 15 dead and hundreds of others injured or missing. The flames burned well into the night, displacing an estimated 45,000 refugees. 3 of them were the dead were children. The search for victims is still ongoing. Since 2017, Bangladesh has sheltered more than 1 million Rohingya Muslims who have fled military crackdowns in neighboring Myanmar. Voters in Israel have returned to the polls for the country's 4th election in 2 years. Several rivals seek the 61-seat threshold required to govern in Israel's legislature. Israelis vote for parties, not individuals. Following last April's election, a power-sharing agreement collapsed in December between Benjamin Netanyahu's party and Benny Gantz's party. Pope Francis spoke to French President Emmanuel Macron by phone to discuss his recent trip to Iraq. The Holy Father requested the call on Sunday after Macron sent him a message on the Pope's anniversary of his election to the papacy. Macron called the Holy Father's visit to Iraq a true turning point for the Middle East. Coming up, 51st state, the growing debate over D.C. statehood, and freedom of religion, why churches in the Philippines may be forced to stay closed. The U.S. House of Representatives held a 4-hour hearing yesterday on the possibility of granting statehood to Washington, D.C. Republicans are accusing Democrats of a power play. They also say Congress does not have the authority to grant statehood to the nation's capital. City's mayor says its lack of representation is, quote, a glaring civil rights issue. If D.C. becomes a state, it would receive 2 senators, add a full voting member in the House of Representatives. Joining us now is Hans von Spakovsky, senior legal fellow at the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Hans, thanks so much for joining us. Always great to have you on. First off, statehood for Washington, D.C. It's been discussed in the past, but why this new push and why now?
Well, this does come up every couple of years, and I think it's come up again because Democrats now control both houses of Congress and the White House. So if they can get a bill through, the president will surely sign it into law. The problem is you cannot establish the District of Columbia as a state through a congressional bill. You can only do it with a constitutional amendment. And look, that's been the opinion of the Justice Departments of both Democratic and Republican administrations going all the way back to when Robert Kennedy was the Attorney General during the Kennedy administration.
Hans, can you take us through these arguments, for and against statehood?
Sure. Look, this would be apart from the constitutional question, this would be a big mistake. The whole reason for the creation of the District of Columbia was because the framers of the Constitution did not want the seat of government, members of Congress, and others to be dependent on, for example, protection and security by a state government. They had a graphic illustration of this when the Continental Congress had to flee Philadelphia in 1783 when they were attacked by unhappy Continental soldiers, and the state government of Pennsylvania refused to do anything about it. So they the framers wanted an independent, sovereign capital under the control of Congress. And I think those reasons are just as valid today as they were back then.
And Hans, how do you see this all, sort of playing out? And what would be the big takeaway here?
Well, the big takeaway is, one, any bill passed by Congress would immediately be attacked in the courts as unconstitutional. Second, remember, the 23rd Amendment gave 3 electoral college votes to the District of Columbia. If they pass this bill and it becomes law with 2 senators and a member of the House without repealing the 23rd Amendment, they won't just have 3 electoral college votes, they will have 6, which is fundamentally unfair and something that should not happen. So this is just a bad idea all around.
And Hans, before we wrap up here, any final thoughts?
Well, it's interesting, this push for this, because, this is not a civil rights issue. Eleanor Holmes Norton has said that. She's the current non-voting representative in the House. By the way, her predecessor, a guy named Walter Fauntleroy, he also agreed that it would take a constitutional amendment to do this, and he also apparently did not think it would be a good idea.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Hans, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Hans von Spakovsky, senior legal fellow, that is, at the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Thanks so much.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
Up next, coronavirus crisis, why Germany is extending its lockdown, and COVID-19 cases. A doctor tells us about the push to protect people with Down syndrome. Although cleared of wrongdoing last week, the Archbishop of Cologne, Germany, says that he could have done more for victims in past clergy abuse cases. Cardinal Rainier Maria Volki said today that he will not resign and will work to avoid future mistakes. While Germany will extend its current coronavirus lockdown until April 18th, Chancellor Angela Merkel announced an extension of restrictions which had been set to expire this Sunday. German officials have agreed to ban public gatherings through Easter weekend from April 1st to the 5th to encourage people to stay at home. Britain is cracking down on people leaving the country to slow the spread of COVID-19. The travel ban prevents overseas vacations but does allow exceptions for work. The British government drafted legislation that would fine violators nearly $7,000. The government in the Philippines is warning Catholic churches that it may forcibly close them if they defy COVID-19 restrictions. The country is banning public meetings, including religious gatherings. The Philippines recorded the highest daily COVID-19 cases on Monday. Manila is imposing a 2-week curfew after the new surge in coronavirus cases. The Catholic administrator in Manila says that it's sad the church is limited during the holiest days of the year. And finally, tonight, a new study finds people with Down syndrome are at an increased risk of the COVID-19 virus. A recent study found with COVID-19, the death rate of people with Down syndrome over the age of 40 is 3 times higher than the general population. One of the doctors who participated in that study joins us now from Rome, Dr. Angelo Carfi, Geriatric Doctor at the Gemelli University Hospital. Doctor, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So tell us more about what you found in your study on people with Down syndrome with COVID-19.
So the main result of this study is that people with Down syndrome are at increased risk for adverse clinical events when infected with SARS-CoV-2, and especially those with age over 40 years, and also some comorbidities like obesity and cognitive decline. So we should be really careful with these persons.
Do we know why there is that correlation with those with Down syndrome and COVID-19?
It's we have a hypothesis, and these are based mostly on the peculiar immune system and reactions of people with Down syndrome, and so this is probably the reason why they behave this way when infected with the SARS-CoV-2, and then there are also there is the clinical complexity, which is characteristic of the adults and the elders with Down syndrome, which makes them very fragile patients to be dealt with.
Can you talk about maybe some of the challenges in protecting people with disabilities?
So I think they share the same challenges we'll all have. So the most challenging aspect to me is the isolation. So this pandemic forced every one of us to face a certain degree of isolation from usual contacts and withdrawal of favorite activities. And people with Down syndrome, people with intellectual disability, strongly rely on these things, on the contacts, on the usual behaviors, and so they are bearing a very heavy burden just for the isolation, and this burden multiplies incredibly when they get infected and they have to really isolate from everybody, and even more if they need to be admitted at the hospital. So this is I think the most challenging part, both for the patient, the families and the loved ones, and also for the clinician who take care of them.
Dr. Carfi, what else can you tell us about this study? Any other findings that came out of it that would be of interest to our viewers?
Now we have vaccines, and this is a really great opportunity. In many countries, people with Down syndrome have been prioritized to get the vaccine first, and this is a really important opportunity because for what I said before, this can help to break the cage and to go back to resume some of favorite activities, to get in connection with other people.
And we always like that good news. Thank you so much. Dr. Angelo Carfi, geriatric doctor at the Gemelli University Hospital in Rome. Thank you again, doctor.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.